In the New Age to Jesus world, where people go from being New Agers to being followers of Christ, I see a lot of issues with that world. And I see a lot of issues with it because essentially they throw the baby out with the bathwater and they think that New Age is separate from Christianity. Now, obviously, New Age is different from Christianity, but here's the reality about New Age is that New Age actually hijacked all the things it teaches and distorted it from Christianity. It pulled its source material from Christianity and distorted it for selfish purposes. You got to be very, very careful with that mindset because obviously there are demonic components to the New Age. And there are also non-demonic aspects of the New Age. And today I'm going to be talking about one of those, and that is shadow work. Now, before you turn off the video and say, whoa, 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 that's evil, I am going to challenge you on that understanding. And it's no coincidence that people who go from New Age to Jesus and then demonize everything New Age are typically women. And that's fair. But the psyche between the masculine and the feminine is very, very different. Every good psychologist knows that the way you treat a woman's depression and the way you treat a man's depression is two very different things. So I'm going to be talking about shadow work in the way it was actually meant to be represented from the beginning of its discovery. And funny enough, our own Lord and Savior kind of hints at it on the Sermon on the Mount. And before I talk about this mistranslation in the Sermon on the Mount, I want to give you a story that put me on this journey of shadow work, okay? I grew up in a very interesting household, I would say. My dad was incredibly intense with me, being I was his first son. I spent pretty much my childhood summers working in the field, working in the yard, non-stop work. If I wasn't at school, I was doing something for my dad. And although it was great, it did absolutely kind of affect my childhood. Now, I'm not going to say I didn't have a childhood because that wouldn't be fully accurate. By the time I was like 3 years old, I was actually helping my dad with it. There's photos of this. Maybe I can find one with a shovel, getting rocks out of the bed of his truck and helping him. So that was my dad's way of actually loving on me because he wanted to show me what it is to be a man. Now, obviously, I was like 7 years old, so I don't know how much of a man's really there. But at the same time, it really affected my psyche. And it affected me in a very, I would say, both positive and negative way. But I tell you that all to say that my dad was absolutely the disciplinary of the household. If you did something bad, you better get ready because dad is not going to be happy. And actually one time when I was about, I'd say 15, 14 years old, my dad actually caught me with my bong. I know I was a bad kid. Caught me smoking weed essentially. And instead of just, slapping me on the wrist or doing something, he actually kicked me out of the house. Here's the kicker, no pun intended. It was winter in Michigan and it was a school night. And put my coat, gloves, and hats on, and he kicked me out of the house. And he said, figure it out. Now that's pretty intense. And to be honest, I love him for these things. I love him now for these things. And when I was a young 14-year-old kid, I absolutely hated these things. But I can say as I've grown and matured and reflected, I would say his intensity was a little bit overboard, obviously, but there was a beauty in it as well that helped me pretty much be a really good entrepreneur because I didn't mess around when it came to work and discipline and these things. But essentially, going back to that being kicked out of the house story, what ended up happening was I went across the street to my buddy's house, Brad, and he had a 2-story house, and I was actually throwing, because it was like 10 o'clock at night, maybe 11 o'clock at night on a school night. So I was throwing rocks at his window to try to get his attention. So he could wake up and let me in his house because my dad wanted me to die in the freezing cold Michigan 35-degree weather. Thankfully, my friend Brad woke up. he came downstairs, opened the door, and when we got a little bit older, we talked about this more, and he actually had a conversation with my mom, and he was like, man, Anton's hair was like frosted over because it was so cold. So I tell you all this, I say that to say this was my childhood. I didn't really have a childhood expressed in a healthy way. It was like very intense all the time. It was like I was either playing like crazy with my friends and being pretty bad, or I was being disciplined by dad. Now, where does a young little boy find comfort and find love and feel safe from the intensity of dad? Mom. Mom is the enabler. Mom is the lover. Mom is the protector from the big bad bear. So my mom for me became a source of safety. My dad was very unstable, I'll say, and my mom was super, super stable. So as a young boy, I leaned on her for that safety because she would never be one to hit me. She would never be one to really even yell at me. My dad took care of that. So she was the soft, feminine, loving presence that made me feel safe. Now, here's the thing. One day it was me, my brother, and my sister. I have a younger brother. He's about 5 years younger than me. And I'm playing what's called Guitar Hero. I'm not really quite sure how old I was, maybe 12, 13, maybe even a little younger. But I'm playing Guitar Hero, and I was really good at Guitar Hero. I was really, really good, and I loved it. I was like the kid that would like play on like super expert mode or whatever. And I'm playing and I'm playing, I'm playing. And my mom starts calling for me from the other room. And there was something about ignoring her that made me feel empowered. And this is such a vivid memory for me. There was something about that rebellion, like, no, I'm too cool to listen to mom. And I'm going to be free playing this guitar. And what was so interesting about the whole memory that my sister, my older sister, she was actually getting a kick out of it that I was not listening to my mom. Like we all thought it was funny. Like, haha, look at us, bad kids, not listening to mom, just gonna keep like jamming out. And I'm like spinning around, trying to show off this and that. And you got my little brother there watching me too. So everyone's in like admiration of me. And keep in mind, my mom's like the sweetest, most loving, kind, gentle person ever. And then she calls for me again from the other room. And I just keep ignoring her. My sister might even turn the TV louder, whatever it was. And then all of a sudden, my mom comes into the video game room. She looks at me and just slaps me across the face. Okay, now the reason I gave you that context about my dad is because this gives you context about how afraid and crazy and unpredictable this was from my mom. My mom was always the lover. My mom was always the sweet one. My mom was always that kind, gentle, feminine, motherly love. Never harm a fly type energy. Doesn't mean she was weak by any means, but she was very, very gentle with her kids because of the intensity with my dad. So when my mom slapped me, all of a sudden I just like went into this whole, I would call it like traumatic response, where my entire nervous system just went into straight like freeze. And I've done a lot of nervous system work. So really people have three types of nervous system responses. One is to fight, to fight the force in front of you, to fight back. The other is to run, to escape whatever, harm is in your way. And the other is to freeze, do nothing. So that's exactly what I did. I froze. And in that moment, something happened that changed the entire course of my life for the negative. I became a people pleaser in that moment. And here's why. Because when my mom slapped me, in my mind, I created a belief, or I made a meaning about what this meant. I essentially made the meaning up that you can never not be nice to a woman. And anytime a woman who you love asks you to do something, you have to obey and you have to submit to what they want. You have this young boy essentially making up this very untruthful belief. In that moment, I became a people pleaser. So what happened from there And, I did a lot of work to uncover all of this. This is work I did years ago with a psychologist. But essentially, I made up this core belief system to protect myself from ever not being able to experience love from the people I cared about most. Like my mom's my everything and was my everything back then. I mean, she was my source of safety from my dad. So when it felt like she abandoned that, which wasn't true, but of course that's how I took it, I associated with it, I can never do that again. I can never do that again. That equals pain. That equals a lack of love from the people I need it from most. So I can never do what I just did. And what did I do? I didn't listen. I didn't submit to her authority, essentially, because I was doing other things. Now, was I being absolutely ruthless and evil? No, I was being a kid. I was playing. This is what boys do. They get fun out of this type of stuff. They like to challenge and push the boundaries of what they can do. This is masculine energy. There's nothing inherently wrong with this. Now, obviously, it can be taken out of hand, but in this case, I never really behaved this way. This is very rare for me. I always submitted to my parents because I was scared of my dad. So I didn't want to get in trouble. Now, does that mean I wasn't a troublemaker with my friends? Absolutely not. But in this particular scenario, a new identity started to form for me because a new belief system was created this day. And from that day on, I struggled very, very intensely with women. And I'm going to tell you how I struggled with women specifically. I never struggled with creating friends. I never struggled even with having girlfriends. What I struggled with truly was, and this manifested a lot of ways throughout my life, but now I'm like fast forwarding to my early 20s. But I mean, I had a lot of girlfriends. I was always the guy with a girlfriend because I had no problem getting the girls because they felt safe because I was really nice. But as I got older, all of my girlfriends cheated on me. I was in 3 relationships in a row where I was the nicest guy. I gave them everything they wanted. I was a total pleaser. And guess what? If you're a man, if you're a young man, women do not want a pleaser. They want to be pleased, but they don't want a pleaser. Because what that means is you truly have no masculine center. You have no masculine core. And that's what happened to me. So I went on this journey of like, why are like all these women who I love with my whole heart and soul, who I'm so nice to, who I give everything to, who I never say no to, keep cheating on me? Like I genuinely didn't understand. And that's when I started to do some of this like deeper psychological work that helped me come to some of these understandings about why I behaved the way I did. And here's what I found out. I found out that I had limiting beliefs that were associated with being bad because my mom told me I was always a good boy. So the day she slapped me, I was being a bad boy. But I'm not a bad boy. That's not my identity. I'm a good boy. So my entire persona was shaped around being this good boy. So for all the men listening, getting into relationships or even in a current relationship, and for all the women listening, maybe put a comment is that if this is true, women want a man who is kind, not a man who is nice. Here's the difference. A nice man has no capacity for things like boundaries, for things like intensity, saying no, for that kind of masculine force that would literally kill something if it's harming its child or if it's harming its wife, or at least have the ability to protect himself, protect his family. And women want a man, like at the deepest essence, a man who is on a mission, a man who is out here that will die for God, that will die for his purpose, that will die for his family. That makes women in their nervous system feel incredibly safe because they say, wow, I can trust that man, because what women do a lot of the times is they select the man they believe they can control. Now, this is This is a part of women that isn't always the healthiest because it's a lack of maturity. But if a woman chooses you because she can control you and then you let her control you, she will eventually resent you. And deeper than that, she will eventually not respect you. And if a man if he has a masculine core, doesn't feel respected, he doesn't feel loved. So how do you get a woman to respect you? Do you say, you need to respect me or I'm leaving you? No. You have to learn how to become a whole man. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that there is a difference between boy psychology and man psychology. And I would argue most men who are 35, 40 years old are emotionally still boys. And it reminds me of something in 1 Corinthians that says, when I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I put away the childish things. This speaks to the difference between a man and a boy. So I went through my whole life trying to figure out, I give these women everything. How can they keep cheating on me? And I started to associate love with loss. Like every time I loved a woman, she would leave me. And I was like, I just don't get it. I thought this is how I thought you're supposed to be romantic. I thought you're supposed to be loving. I thought you're supposed to be, this gentle, nice guy. So then I realized, oh my God, my mom traumatized me. So I was like, I gotta figure this out. I gotta fix this. This is horrendous. So this is when I went on the journey of understanding what is a real man. And this is actually around the same time I was becoming a Christian, because I started studying Christ. And what I understood about Christ before a Christian was that he was a hippie. I mean, that was essentially the picture I had in my head. I didn't have the Jesus cleansing the temple and calling the Pharisees brood vipers and whitewashed tombs and all these really intense things, and talking about putting a millstone around people's neck if they harm children. I didn't have this version of Jesus. I had this like really nice, kind of fluffy, nice guy. Because in my consciousness from a young boy, I associated masculinity to being nice. And that's not masculinity. Masculinity is kind, but masculinity is strength. And this is now going to take me to the mistranslation from our Lord on the Sermon on the Mount. And we've all heard Jesus say it. We've heard this verse a million times, but do we really know what it means? It's right here. And it's on the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And when I go down to what meekness means here in the Orthodox Study Bible, this is what it says. It says, meekness is an attitude of being content with both honor and dishonor. It is an imitation of Christ, who said, learn from me, for I am gentle, meek, and lowly in heart. The meek are God-controlled and have mastery over their passions, especially anger. Now, here's the key right here. Meekness is not passive weakness, but strength directed under control. And when I read that, I was like, whoa. Meek is not passivity. Meek is not holding back. Meek is referencing to having strength, but under your control. It's not like an unconscious warrior who just likes to kill people because that's what he's commanded to. It's more of like an integrated warrior, one that can kill if he has to, but he chooses to not. And we've actually heard Jordan Peterson talk about this. Maybe I'll play a little clip here.
I read this New Testament line, decades ago, and I could never understand it. The line is, the meek shall inherit the earth. And I thought, there's something wrong with that line. It just doesn't make sense to me. Meek just doesn't seem to me to be a moral virtue. But I was looking through these sayings, these maxims, and that was one of them. The meek shall inherit the earth. But a good translation, or the word has moved in the 300 years or so since it was translated. What it means is this: those who have swords and know how to use them, but keep them sheathed, will inherit the world. And that's another thing I've been telling. Yeah, no kidding. That's a lot
different.
That's a big difference. It's so great. And so, like, one of the things I tell young men, well, and young women as well, but the young men really need to hear this more, I think, is that you should be a monster. You know, because everyone says, well, you should be harmless, virtuous. You shouldn't do anyone any harm. You should sheath your competitive instinct. You shouldn't try to win. You know, you don't want to be too aggressive. You don't want to be too assertive. You want to take a back seat and all of that. It's like, no. Wrong. You should be a monster, an absolute monster, and then you should learn how to control it.
Do you know the expression, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war?
Right, exactly. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right. And so when I tell young men that, they think, well, lots of them are competitive. They're low in agreeableness, you know, because that's part of being competitive temperamentally. It's like, is there something wrong with being competitive? There's nothing wrong with it. There's something wrong with cheating. There's something wrong with being a tyrant. There's something wrong with winning unfairly. All of those things are bad. But you don't want people to win? What's the difference between trying to win and striving? You want to eradicate striving?
Well, it's the uncomfortable feeling that people associate with losing. When they've personally experienced it, they look at losing as they've been oppressed or they've been hurt. But what they don't understand is that is the motivation for growth. And one of the most beautiful things that I think a young person can get involved in is martial arts, because martial arts teach you that in a way that very few things do.
And he makes a really great point. And here's what it is. And here's the issue I see with so many people so many men inside of the Christian community, and then women shunning shadow work. This is shadow work. It is scary to become dangerous. It's actually scary, because if you're a gentle, kind soul, becoming dangerous means you're going to have to come in contact with something that is strong or is a shadow. But guess what? That's not bad. That's actually necessary for proper masculine development. So for all these women shunning shadow work, you got to be very, very, very cautious with that mindset. Now, obviously, shadow work in excess, where you lean into like demonic things and lust and that's obviously demonic. But throwing the baby out with the bathwater in this category is not Christian. It's actually anti-Christian. According to our Lord, he says you should be strong and have it under your control. You should be able to use force, but have it under your control. Now, I train martial arts. Every single martial artist knows this. You don't join a martial arts because you want to hurt people. You join a martial arts because one day you might have to. You might have to hurt people to protect yourself. You might have to hurt people to literally save somebody or disarm somebody with a knife or a gun or whatever it might be to protect your family or yourself. And this, my friends, is one of the most misunderstood things in Christianity, and it has been weaponized by popular culture to neuter men, to say, oh, no, you're good enough just the way you are. You shouldn't muckle the waters too much. You should play it safe. You shouldn't go for your dreams. You shouldn't be ambitious. You should just be a really nice person. That doesn't work for men. That's anti-Christian. So all of this stuff actually made me look at Christ, and it was like an ego death of like, what? Christ is so masculine. Christ is the perfect man. He's gentle, but he's also intense at times. But he can be both, and he knows when to turn it on or off. And this made me fall in love with Jesus before I believed he was God, just as the figure himself, as like an archetype, if you will, before I actually accepted him as my Lord and Savior. I looked at all of this through a psychological lens at first, which essentially helped me see it. It not only is it like both symbolically true, it's literally true. Like Jesus is painted into the fabric of this reality because he created this reality. But, you know, because of the way my mind works, it took me some stepping stones to get to that full acceptance. But I say this to all the Christian men and all the Christian women listening, is that you want to be meek, but that's not a passive pushover. It's also like the whole turn the other cheek. That's another verse that's totally taken out of context. Turn the other cheek is all about mercy. It's all about being merciful like Christ is. Think about when Christ was going to the cross and they chose Barabbas over him, to let Barabbas free over him. Think about that. There's that great scene in The Passion of the Christ when Barabbas looks at Christ and obviously Jim Caviezel, but there's that intensity there because Christ has such a love where he's like, I could get out of these chains right now. I could be set free. But I love you all so much. I'm going to let you choose this prisoner to be set free over me. I'm going to actually choose my own death and turn the other cheek because I love you so much, because I'm merciful. I don't need to harm creation to save myself. I'm going to go willfully to the cross and suffer and die essentially for us. That is masculinity. Well, guess what? You can't do that if you don't have strength. And that's Jordan Peterson's entire point about all of this. You don't want a nice man. You want a good man. Do you want to know the difference? A good man is a good man because he knows what it means. He understands what it is not to be a good man. There is no virtue in weakness. There's no virtue in weakness. You know why? Because you're actually not capable of strength. You're just weak. You're actually not capable of being a lion. So you're not virtuous just because you're weak. Real strength, meekness, is strength. You can use it like a martial artist, but it's under your control. And one of my friends, Jason Wilson, who was actually also on Joe Rogan, he said something similar. And Jason is he is very Christian. I mean, his entire life is following Christ, and he actually owns a martial arts school here in Detroit, Michigan. And I loved what he says about one of his students who embodies the virtue of meekness. Check it out here.
Able to deal with bullies. One of my students, a beautiful kid, Josiah, short, curly hair, beautiful personality. He was getting bullied at school, but he thought it wasn't Christ-like, or the Christian thing to do was to defend yourself. You're supposed to take it. I'm like, I don't know where you got that from. I said, if someone is trying to harm you, you defend yourself. So the bully grabs him one day. He grabs him from behind. He throws him, kicked the legs out, and slammed the bully down to the ground. You would think he would celebrate just defending himself. But what made Josiah the proudest was that before the bully hit the ground, he pulled up on his hoodie to stop his head from hitting the cement.
Wow.
That's when I knew, I said, this is it. Where the good kids, the gentlemen, the kids who are bullied and overlooked can defend themselves, turn on the lion, but reset back to the lamb. No one wants to be prowling all around, defending and looking rough all the time, having to hit and being just in that fight or flight mode 24/7. Someone tries to harm you, you defend yourself demonstrably, but you reset. You don't ever allow your kind spirit to conform to something that's callous. Do not live from your fears. Live from the good that's inside of you.
So Christians, have you been hijacked by the demonization of shadow work to justify weakness? Or are you going to step up to the plate and embody things like strength by literally becoming dangerous so that you can be the man Christ is calling you to become? So going back to my story, after I started to figure all of this out and when I started to follow Jesus just first as a teacher, I started getting into things like martial arts. I started because that was not in my temperament. I was truly weak. I was very loving and nice, but I didn't have the virtue, like innocent as a dove, wise as a serpent. I was just innocent as a dove. And guess what happens to innocent doves in this world? They get killed by the serpent, not because you're supposed to become like the serpent, but because you're supposed to be able to at least be strategic enough to protect yourself in case there is a serpent. Because you want to protect that innocence inside of you, that dove, that Holy Spirit, if you will. But the only way you're going to do that is with integration. The only way you're going to do that with real strength. And if you've ever come up against the demonic, you know you can't be naive. Otherwise, the demonic is going to totally manipulate you. So you actually have to be integrated so you can have discernment so that you can protect that innocence inside of you. That's the whole point of this. You don't turn your hands into lethal weapons because you want to hurt people. You do it because you might have to use your physical body to protect the innocent, to protect a woman, to protect a child, to protect yourself. And that's not anti-Christian. That is actually Christian. So all Christians, we've been hijacked, we've been manipulated by this quote unquote holy teaching when it's not. It's passivity, it's naivety. This is not Christian. This is anti-Christian. So I challenge you, men, learn to understand what this means and go into your world and apply it. Because I can tell you, if you're a single man and you've struggled with women, it's likely because you don't have that masculine strength integrated inside of you, because somewhere in your mind you have made it wrong or you made it bad. That's exactly what I did. And I don't have the identity of a bad kid. When I let my mom down by not listening to her and instead decided I'm just going to please women for the rest of my life, I was making a false association that was affecting how I showed up in this world. And that was really, 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 really harmful and took me forever to deconstruct and then change. So what did I do? How did I start to integrate this? Well, first of all, I got a better role model of what it meant to be a man, and that was Christ. And I looked at it from a wholesome view, where there was times where he was intense, but the intensity came with a purpose. He was drawing people. He was calling out their BS. He was calling them to a higher truth. Truth is uncomfortable. Truth is bold. Truth is in your face. It's so intense sometimes. So that's not bad. You have to learn how to confront in yourself what it is you really want as a man. What is your mission? What do you stand for? What are you willing to die for? And are you truly man enough to protect your family and or your future family? And if you're not, it's okay to admit it. I sure wasn't. Go learn a martial arts. It's going to be super uncomfortable because, like I said, in my mind, I had an association with integrated masculinity, which is essentially just strength under your control. I had a bad association with that. I actually thought that was somehow dark because that's just toxic. You're justifying unconscious masculinity for masculinity. And actually I was the one in the wrong because I was like a super new age, nice guy hippie where I didn't have that bone in my body because I had the story about it being bad because of the thing with my mom. So I actually had to learn, and this is where the line can be a little far, but I'm just going to be honest with you guys. I mean, I'm still in my 20s, so I think men in their 20s, they need to go through this phase. Like, you need to learn how to flirt with a girl. I think that's actually healthy. Like, I didn't do any of that. It was always just pure pleasing because I was deathly afraid for number one, to be rejected, and number two, not make them think I'm nice. Like, I was always afraid like they were going to see something other than niceness inside of me because, again, I associated that with my mom's love, which is what we crave most is love. So we're going to do everything to avoid not being loved. Well, funny enough, no woman wants you to constantly please them all the time. There's actually times where women want you to say no. And they'll actually test your masculinity because what they're trying to do is feel your masculinity. And she's like, God, will he just say no to me? And it's like, no, don't please her. Actually learn how to own what it is you want and go for it. And funny enough, when you operate in this way, women feel that because true masculinity is so rare. It doesn't mean to become like Andrew Tate and become a masochist and just totally unconsciously be like this warrior energy all the time. No, that's not what I'm saying. But you do have to have a little bit of that. You do have to be able to be firm, to set a boundary, to tell a woman no, to tell her honestly how you feel and why things aren't going to go this way. Now, does that mean you're always like demanding and in power in that way? No, of course not, especially if you're in a relationship. But if you're not in a relationship and you struggle, this might be part of the reason why. Because like I said in the beginning, women do not want to be pleased. And I had learned from my mistakes. I got cheated on by 3 women because I pleased them so much to losing myself in them. I had no sense of like individuation. I had no sense of Anton's identity. It was all about what can I do for them? How can I make their lives better? How can I make things easier? And in that, you lose yourself. You aren't connected to God and truth in that moment. You are totally people-pleasing because you're so afraid. Essentially, what it boils down to fear. You're afraid she's going to reject you. You're afraid she's not going to love you. But the funny thing is, the counterintuitive thing is that by doing these things, she ends up resenting you. She ends up not respecting you. And if a woman doesn't respect you, eventually she's going to leave. So how do you get her to respect you? Well, you embody true virtues, which is strength, which is courage, which is boldness, which is also love and kindness. But kindness is not people-pleasing. Kindness is actually truthful. And I can tell you, if the truth feels unfavorable to them, it's not going to feel like love. There's lots of forms of love. There's like puppy dog love, but then there's like tough love. And that's what my father did to me. It's like when he kicked me out of the house, he wasn't doing that because he didn't love me. He was actually doing that because he loved me. Now, was that a healthy form of it? No. But I have that memory till this day. And guess what I did after that? I never smoked weed ever again. So it worked. Like, is it the best approach? No. But if you start to think about it through this lens of like, yeah, tough love is love. Setting boundaries is love. Telling people no if I truly don't want to do it is love. You'll start to integrate. You'll start to become more whole. And that's when I feel like as Christians, we can show up in the world in the way that the world actually needs us, and not this false sense of like, I just need to be a super nice guy all the time. That's not going to work in your business. That's not going to work in the real world. That's not going to work with women. And I can tell you, it's going to lead to bitterness and resentfulness. And when you start to get into that place, it starts to get very, very dangerous. With that said, I'm going to end this video. Let's all challenge our own definitions and our own understanding of what it means that the meek shall inherit the earth. And for everybody listening, if you enjoyed this, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.